I brought this up yesterday, and I hope I'm wrong because I think every season should be taken on its own accord. But we were discussing Tennessee possibly getting left out of the college football playoff if they win 10 games, which it sounds crazy, but things could happen. And we saw an Indiana team come out of nowhere that I said we're going to end the show if they ended up making the college football playoff, but they did, and we kept going. So we're cruising on. But my question for you is the way that Tennessee lost, which was a big thud on the primetime game that night. Caleb, is that going to affect the committee members when they look at Tennessee and they weigh them versus one school or another?
It shouldn't, particularly if you look at what Ohio State did the rest of the way, and also just on the principle you brought up. But it will. And I wrote a column about this because there's historical precedent. I want to cite it. So, Dave, you remember the TCU-Georgia national title game. We all do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think on principle, Florida State should not have made the college football playoff anyway. But, Dave, let's be honest. When Florida State was left out at the end of 2023 after going undefeated, it's because after Jordan Travis got hurt, the committee was worried about another TCU situation, weren't they? They did not want that on TV.
Did they really? You think they put that much thought into it?
Oh, yeah. They put Jordan Travis going out as thought into it. And they knew without Jordan Travis, Florida State was already not on Alabama's or Michigan's level. If Florida State had to play Alabama or Michigan without Jordan Travis, what do you think either of those schools would have done to them? I mean, it would have been ugly.
It wouldn't have gone well. And Tennessee's seen that happen before with, obviously, Hendon Hooker, but John Higgins because of academics, because he took too many difficult math classes. So, yeah, I think you factor that in there. Now, obviously, the Columbia collapse was this Columbia collapse, but let's pretend that's a close loss or Tennessee wins that game. If Hendon Hooker got hurt, would they factor that in? Would Tennessee be the odd man out? I kind of think you're onto something because you're right with Jordan Travis, and he was an exciting player, and exciting players sell tickets. That's not what it's about, but they also get viewers. And I just I'm afraid that if Tennessee had won that South Carolina game, I still don't know if they get in if Hooker's hurt.
That's a great question. You're right. You know, I never thought about that because in my mind, I'm like, well, obviously they get in because eventually they had to put TCU in because they didn't have a fourth team because USC lost the Pac-12 title. But you're right. If Hendon Hooker's hurt, they're going to look for – now they're going to be proven wrong because TCU got blown out by Georgia, but we didn't have that to go off of at the time. They're going to wonder who to put in. And, man, that would be rough. Now, so let's carry that over to now. Let's remember what happened with Tennessee and Ohio State, guys. The first round of the college football playoff was a disaster, right? I mean, you saw SMU, I forget who played Notre Dame. SMU, Indiana, both lose in convincing fashion, and then whoever Penn State played, and I'm already forgetting. I'm sorry for drawing a blank. No, or was it Texas, Arizona State? I'm sorry. Either way, you saw the first three teams lose or like win in dominant fashion, and it was teams that were questionable on whether or not they belonged. But then everybody's waiting that Saturday night of December the 21st for that Tennessee-Ohio State game. Like, all right, here's the 9-8 matchup. This is the one that's going to be exciting. We're ready for it. All the eyeballs were actually tuned into that game for the first round, and Tennessee fans packed Columbus for it. And what happened? What did everybody see? Another letdown, the worst blowout of the first weekend. That's what's sticking in everybody's mind. So if Tennessee's on the bubble next year, it's going to work against them, even though it shouldn't. Dave and I are both saying it shouldn't, but it will. Now, remember, it's going to work against them because the biggest reason it shouldn't is Ohio State blew out everybody in the playoff, and Tennessee had faced them. Tennessee had to visit them. They were the only team that had to face them on the road, and they faced them without their best player because Dylan Sampson got hurt on the first drive. So it's kind of ridiculous that you would hold that against them, but I'm sorry, the committee will. And I think that's, I don't really think it's a question, honestly.
Well, it does help, though, that Ohio State did win it all. If Ohio State had gone out the next game and laid an egg, then certainly you would look at Tennessee and you would wonder. And Yeah, I think there's something to be said too for if we're talking about ways that Tennessee could get left out of a playoff, a 10 team or at a 10 win regular season. They're not as sexy and as exciting. Now they may be with Nico this year with another year under his belt, but I mean, it just scintillating, sexy. I mean, out of the group, they were not in the top half of the sexiest teams. I mean, I could argue Indiana was even sexier because they were a new name that you didn't expect much out of football.
The novelty of Indiana being in. You're right.
Yes. So Vols lost to Ohio State will hurt them. You believe it will?
I believe it will. I believe it will, and it shouldn't, but it will.
So you're still on the? Are you still on the take that 10 wins and they don't definitely get in?
Yes, I'm not saying they don't get in for sure. Well, okay, put it this way: it's not a guarantee they get in at 10 wins. They were out of the playoff picture with 2 losses the next to the last week of the regular season this past year. I mean, Dave, if Oklahoma doesn't beat Alabama and if Florida doesn't beat Ole Miss, Tennessee's not making the playoff. That's how close they were to getting knocked out. So
you're right. Better coach Gruden got 50%, 57%. Calipari got 42%. Now the new poll question: Vols lost to Ohio State will hurt them in college football playoff this year. No, so far, but we just got a couple of votes in, so maybe we're in the minority here. It would be a shame if that were the case. And I will say this: I know a lot of people like to just throw this around that this particular organization or whatever doesn't like this or that, whatever. But I do feel like the national media looks for reasons to leave Tennessee out of big time football games. I really do. And I think the committee, not the committee, or the individual bowl committees oftentimes gave them a better bowl because they knew they would travel so well. But these guys are not about that. I mean, they don't really care. They just want eyeballs. It's really not even about tickets. They want eyeballs on TV. And Tennessee, I think they got a couple of things working against them. I don't think the way they played helps them at all against Ohio State. And I think the other factor is they might not be exciting. I mean, if it's Nico running double tights the whole season, I'm sorry, that shouldn't matter. But if you're at 10 wins and there's somebody else that's at 10 wins and they're exciting, or they're Lane Kiffin and they're throwing the ball all over the park, I'm sorry, that team's going to get in.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's what people want. And we saw this work against, I mean, let's go back to the 90s for a minute, the Peyton Heisman race. There were no questions about giving Danny Werfel the Heisman the year before, right? Because Danny Werfel was so much fun to watch, even though Steve Spurrier's system was so much fun to watch.
Right.
But, the Tennessee offense had a little more balance. So Peyton wasn't going to be as sexy of a Heisman candidate as Danny Werfel, even though he was a much, much better NFL player.
Well, he was a much better quarterback. Oh.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, exactly.
Danny Werfel, you use this term all the time, created in a lab. He was created in a lab to run that offense because he knew to throw it to a spot, make a read, and get the hell knocked out of him. Because Steve Spurrier did not protect his quarterback. Somewhere Patrick Ramsey is still twitching from all the times he got hit when they're running 5 wide in the NFL. I mean, you can't do that. You're going to get your quarterback killed. And I remember watching him. It's the first time, you talked about your wife earlier. She winces when quarterbacks get hit. I remember watching, and I hate the Redskins, Commanders, Washington football team. I dislike them, but I felt sorry for Patrick Ramsey. That guy may have been a good quarterback, but we'll never know.
That is true. You're right, Spurrier. And remember, the fun and gun wasn't like an actual system. That was Spurrier realized SEC teams always had the extra linebacker. So it was like, if I put an extra receiver out there and let my quarterback get hit, that receiver is always going to beat the guy guarding him every single time.
Right. But you're going to get hit every single time. Big, huge, monstrous man. And yes. I remember Fred White told me this story. I remember Joey Matthews.
Yes.
Now, he was at Sevier County, and I called a couple of his games, just play by play. And he was, I thought, really good. A little heavy footed, but big arm. And going into that 98 season, going into spring practice, they made all the quarterbacks alive. And I said, well, how did that work out for the quarterbacks? And well, T really responded. And I said, what about, I asked Fred, I said, what about Joey Matthews? Yeah, that ended him. So he said, that was it. You might as well go back to Sevier County. I mean, he's a police officer now and a great man, but you didn't want to go live because he was one of the rare midterm enrollees that they're all over the place now. You didn't want to go live in 98 against that defense. No red.
No, but that's also a test to your mental. I'm not trying to knock Joey Matthews, but you know, being prepared to get hit, not the way Patrick Ramsey got hit, but that is a test of your mental toughness to a certain degree, because like you got to get used to it. Like, just to give you a quick example, Peyton Manning in the NFL, after he came back from his surgeries to play for Denver, they tried to hold him out of preseason and he refused. He went in all 4 games that year. He said, look, I need to get hit. He even said, I need to get knocked the hell out so I can get back into rhythm, was what he told the Broncos at the time.
Timothy, we appreciate your generosity, as Quincy Calhoun will be going to a fantastic university one day. We appreciate the Tim Bucks. Hyper offensive scheme, sideline to sideline passing, and 20 to 50-yard bombs, and 2 different runs. No creativity, specifically if you don't have the players. Why don't we discuss that tomorrow? Because does this offense lack creativity? I gotta be honest with you. I think Josh Heupel is more creative than you think. And I think the fact that he came up with that 2 tight end system is all that kept Tennessee in the college football playoff hunt.